The whole nation has been exposed to some tough stuff, a lot of stuff that can be very difficult to process, which can create trauma in our lives.
It's almost like we're counseling each other through what has been a tough couple of weeks.
I saw the vivid pictures of Charlie Kirk getting shot. Politics is not the answer to this. Jesus is the answer to this.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of The Two Things You Shouldn't Talk About. This is the podcast where we talk about faith, we talk about politics, and everywhere they intersect. And I'm delighted this week to be joined by someone who joined us on the show in 2020, but has returned to join us again this week for another episode. So I'd like to welcome Corky French. Thank you so much for joining us again on The Two Things You Shouldn't Talk About. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you, Josh. It's really good to be back with you. I thoroughly enjoyed the first podcast we did, and am honored that you would invite me back, and excited about the things that you want to talk about today. So good to see you, brother.
Absolutely. And, you know, we were talking a little before we started recording, just to fill everyone in, that it's been kind of a crazy few weeks, and people have been subjected to really traumatic experiences that they probably wouldn't have experienced at other times in their life, like namely seeing people, you know, on the internet getting shot or getting killed. And, you know, I just feel like people don't probably naturally have the tools to cope with those kinds of things and, you know, to deal with these situations. So I think last time we spoke, we were in the wake of the George Floyd situation. Mm-hmm. And then now we're in the, you know, it's right after the Charlie Kirk assassination. So I don't know if it's something about these traumatic situations where I look to the experience of others, but, you know, we had already scheduled this show, but it feels like God's timing that, you know, it turned out that you were going to come on right after all of these things happened. So, you know, it feels like providence to have you on in the wake of this. So, you know, have you experienced any, you know, or have you heard of the experiences of any other people that in your life where they've said that these seeing these videos or situations has been impactful or distressing to them?
Well, it so happens that today, my daughter, my youngest daughter, lives in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is about 30 miles from me. And I went up today and took her out to lunch, and her husband, and it's her 40th birthday. And we were talking about some of this, and as a young married couple with 3 children, and they're processing all this, and their oldest daughter's in middle school, so she's old enough to know what's going on. And my daughter said to me, she said, you know, I think it was in lieu of me telling her that we were going to be talking about trauma. And she said, well, Dad, you know, I've been through trauma in my life, but I've never seen somebody shot and killed right in front of me, referring to watching the video of Charlie Kirk. So the whole nation has been exposed to some tough stuff. The riots that are going on, and, you know, even this morning you and I were talking about the attack on the ICE agency in Dallas, and a lot of stuff that can be very difficult to process, which can create trauma in our lives. So yeah, it's very real right now.
Mm-hmm. And last time we spoke, I think tensions were extremely high, where police officers are finding themselves you know, it was in the midst of the defund the police situation, and we've kind of moved a little bit past that, where I think the pressure is not quite as much there politically to defund law enforcement. But do you think at this moment in time that there's still that level of pressure on the police and sort of hostility towards law enforcement?
Well, I don't want to get too political, but yeah, I do think it's better, and it's been better since the election and President Trump, because he is very supportive of law enforcement. He's supportive of our military. But we see the same kind of thing carried out right now with what's happening with our ICE agents. And again, these are just men and women. They just want to go home at night. Right. And they literally are enforcing laws that are on the books. So it's not their fault. I think you could go back to George Floyd, but really, again, I don't want to be too political, but I think this all started with Obama. His failure during his presidency to provide support for law enforcement officers and it kind of grew roots of disrespect for law enforcement in general, which we see now carried out against ICE agents. And then with a lot of the rhetoric, things that are being said, the doxing, whatever, it's still not what it should be, and there is a lack of respect among a lot of people.
Yeah, there was that little shift, it feels like, where people went from a respect of the authorities who were upholding the laws, and then gradually it sort of became this. There was this feeling of understanding the offender, and then maybe that moved towards, well, why are we creating situations where these people are wanting to break the law, and then it just gradually shifts towards more and more towards leniency, and not always in a good way. I think it's good to be understanding and lenient, but it's gone way too far now where we're trying to find, or at least a lot of people are trying to find any excuse to justify the actions of others, even when they're criminal actions. And we mentioned about the lady who was unfortunately attacked on the bus and ended up bleeding out on the bus or the tram or whatever that was. I saw a lot of people jumping in immediately and trying to almost defend the actions, and there was GoFundMe accounts created that were funding the perpetrator. But those situations with that and with Charlie Kirk, I noticed that people in my life were impacted in a way that they've probably never been impacted before, especially considering they don't know these people. So what happens to people's minds and bodies when they see something traumatic like that on, whether it's online or not? What is it that takes place in the mind of someone when they're exposed to something that's horrific?
Well, that's different for every person, and I always had what I call the law of the thirds when it came to a traumatic situation and how it impacted people. A third of the people will be impacted severely. Mm-hmm. A third of the people will be impacted mildly, and a third of the people will not be impacted at all. Mm. And so for me, when I'm trying to support or deal with people that are in trauma, one of the things I have to do, it's not an exact science, but is evaluate, okay, which one of those thirds does this person fall into? Mm-hmm. In each of those categories, there's different responses. There can be, for the person that has, no trauma, they're kind of, okay, that happened, they're going on. The person with mild trauma, it could just bother them. It could, kind of sit with them in their minds during the day. For the person with severe trauma, it can result in shutting down, nightmares, flashbacks, PTSD in the long run.
Right.
So it can affect people a lot of different ways. The important thing is if we encounter a traumatic situation, is not to ignore it, but to deal with it at whatever level, because if undealt with, then it festers, it grows, it gets bigger than it has to be.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything that explains why people deal with things in different ways? Is that just a personality thing, or?
Yeah, that can be a personality thing. It can be past experiences. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I hope we can get into this later about what do you say to people, but
yes,
all of us experience things differently, and that can be based on our history, our background, our past experiences, our faith. Mm-hmm. There's a whole lot of things that can affect how it affects us, and we need to realize that therefore everybody is different, and everybody reacts differently for different reasons.
Yeah, I noticed that with certainly when someone dies of, let's say, an illness or natural causes, you can definitely notice a difference. At least I can, with people of faith, because they have that sort of strong understanding of what happens after death and where people are going, especially, if they're faithful believers. So I've certainly seen that. And, I wondered myself, how do people even cope whenever they don't have that kind of framework of understanding of life and death? Because, it's of such a help to me. And, my own mother passed away at the start of the year. And, that was of cancer, but it was there. I don't think anyone in our family had this sort of harrowing grief that you see from people with no hope. And, I know it's a cliche to say that, but we all had, we all had trust and hope in what was, waiting her whenever she passed on to the, to the next life. And that's, I don't know. I don't understand how someone could deal with a situation like that without that
Yeah,
religious
let
belief.
me give you a good example of that. And by the way, what you said is not a cliche. That's biblical truth. So
Hmm.
don't apologize for that. Your audience may not know, I worked with law enforcement for 25 years, and I was chaplain and worked very closely with the individuals within law enforcement. But I also was a chaplain of the community. So when they had a critical incident, they would call me, and I would go to the scene, assess the situation, gather the appropriate information. Then I'd be the one to go knock on the door and go tell a family member that their loved one was dead.
Hmm.
And you talk about trauma, that was trauma.
Yeah.
And what I learned after doing that dozens of times is when I would go into a house and they always like, what's wrong at the door. I wasn't going to tell them at the door, get them in, get them sat down. I would look around the house
Hmm.
and I would look to see if there were any signs of faith
Yeah.
or that they were faith in people. Because as I delivered this information and then walked with them through the first hour or two, if they were people of faith, I could go a whole different direction than I could with somebody who
Yeah.
maybe was not a person of faith. It's like
Hmm.
the passage that you quoted. When somebody, it's like Charlie Kirk. You mentioned him. We could celebrate his death, and we could talk about God saying to him, "Good and faithful servant, enter in, well done." That's a whole different approach as opposed to somebody who didn't know Jesus. We don't have that confidence
Yeah.
in that or whatever. So what you're saying is real important, and that's one of the things I keyed in on when I dealt with people in those kind of traumatic situations was, okay, if they're a person of faith, then I can go this direction, and I've got something to give them. Now, the
Hmm.
folks that didn't have that, or I didn't see that, or if I didn't see anything, I still would eventually ask them,
Yeah.
uh, in a non-aggressive way, if they were people of faith or whatever. If not, then I didn't have the same tools that I did
Yeah.
believers, and that was real key. And it was sad because there were some people. Can I call your church? Don't go to church. Can I call your pastor? Don't have a pastor.
Mm.
And sad in our community here, over and over again, I'm like, can I call your friends? I don't have any friends. And what
Yeah.
I realized, there's a whole lot of people that live in and amongst us that are lonely and
Yeah.
isolated. And I found that to be very sad.
Hmm. It's definitely prevalent because the you can't take for granted those support mechanisms that people would have had in the past, where naturally even people's neighbors would have looked out for them. I think in the past more than today. We're lucky to have good neighbors, but when I lived in Belfast, I had very few interactions with my neighbors back when I lived in a street with full of people, and that's so foreign compared to previous generations where everybody knew everybody on the street. So I've definitely have experience of that, and with people being more secular, they're isolated.
Well, and I think too, just being really honest, COVID really
Mm.
accelerated and accentuated that because we were locked up in our houses. They even tried to tell us we couldn't go to church.
Yeah.
They put masks on us where we couldn't even see our faces. We had to
Hmm.
walk in certain directions down aisles of a grocery store. Couldn't go get your hair done except for the politicians
Yeah,
anyway.
unless you were a governor.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think it was a problem. I think COVID accentuated that problem. And our kids, I saw it in my grandkids, man. After not a while of not being able to go to school, they were just struggling socially. They were struggling
Hmm.
with loneliness.
Yeah.
They were struggling with being disassociated with their people around them. And I think if we can apply this to trauma, uh, having people around you, having support, having relationships. I don't care if it's your church, it's your neighborhood. I don't care if it's a book club. We need people.
Yeah.
God built us that way that we
Hmm.
need people. And
Yeah.
when you get into a traumatic situation, that need is accelerated.
Hmm.
And speaking of that, playing off of that, you made me think of something else. When people are in trauma, I dealt with this extensively with drug addicts. It was true of people who experienced trauma in their family or whatever. the number one thing that people tend to do when they experience trauma is they isolate
Mm.
and they stay off to themselves. They go into a shell. And it's kind of like, again, one of the principles when you're in trauma, you're struggling, or even if you're depressed, we avoid most what we need most. One of the best things in the world for if you've been in trauma, if you're struggling, if you have pain, is exercise. Well,
Right.
if you're depressed and down in the dumps, who wants to go exercise?
Right. Or even healthy eating, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah, eating healthy, being with people.
Yeah.
And so we avoid most what we need most. And isolation is a big problem for people who have experienced trauma.
I'm assuming that's probably because people think that others don't understand what they're going through in that moment, or people feel like they're on their own in this journey.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Or I just, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to, I just want to go over here in a corner and
mm,
nobody bother me.
yeah, avoidance. Yeah.
And you got to fight through that. I mean, I understand it, but you really have to encourage people to fight through that because that is not a healthy way. But again, the premise, we avoid most what we need most.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was interested in, and wanted to talk to you about is, some of the steps of grief that you notice from your experiences, and if you want to, interject with some stories of people who have acted, in different ways, you're welcome to do so. But I'm thinking, you mentioned you would have to do these, knocks on the doors, or let's say, even in a pastoral sense, if someone says, someone in my congregation has experienced this thing. So, in the first instance, when someone experiences trauma, and you mentioned there's different types of people, but what's going through your mind in terms of supporting them? Is it comforting? Is it just making sure they understand the situation fully? What's going through your mind, and what are you trying to do in the first moments?
Yeah, that was somewhat up to them. Insert a couple of stories here. I knocked on the door one night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and a family that had a daughter who was up in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee, and just a really bad rainstorm up there. She hydroplaned across the median on I-40 and was hit right on her door by an 18-wheeler and killed her instantly. And I had to go with a deputy, always had a deputy with me, knock on the door to tell this family what had happened and that their daughter was gone. In one of the early stages of grief is denial.
Hmm.
This particular father, I don't know if he had a wife or not, to be honest with you. He was there by himself. And I woke him up 2 o'clock in the morning. He'd been in bed, so I'm sure he was foggy anyway. He started screaming and shouting at me. And he literally physically attacked me
Wow.
and started swinging at me. And I was big enough, and then with the deputy, we were able to handle him. But
Hmm.
that's one person. I went to another family, and their son had died in Nashville somewhere, and it was in Franklin in a very wealthy subdivision. And I knocked on the door at 5 o'clock in the morning with them, and went in, and I'm like, hey, you got somewhere we can sit down? And we sat down at their kitchen table, and I said, well, I've got, I'm sorry to be the one, but I've got some information to share with you and whatever. And I told them that their son had died. I
Hmm.
don't remember what the circumstances was. And Josh, both the husband and wife, they turned and they looked at each other and they looked back at me and they said, oh, thank goodness. We were afraid you were going to tell us that my husband's mother had died. And
Wow.
they had no emotional response to their
Yeah.
son dying whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
And that's probably the shortest amount of time I ever had to spend after
Yeah.
delivering a death notification because they were just
Yeah.
fine.
That
You
doesn't
know, and,
sound like they're surprised by that. That maybe
yeah, I
there
don't know
was.
what the family dynamics were there. I don't know if they were alienated from him or it was just unusual. And then one of those, well, two more, just to show you how different people react. Now, of course, we're dealing with extreme trauma here when you
Yes.
are woken up or whatever and told that your loved one is dead. But I knocked on another door, and a very attractive lady came to the door, probably in her 50s, and it was a Saturday morning, and was pretty spruced up. And I introduced myself, and she told me, and she said, "Yeah, I'm just waiting for my husband to come home. Every Saturday morning, he goes and does. I won't mention what it was, so it doesn't indicate anybody. But and then he comes home, and we go eat a nice lunch together, and I'm just waiting on him to get home." Well, he wasn't coming home. And so I took her inside, and I sat her down and told her, and she went into shock. And I've never experienced it. She started touching me and would do my face like this, and she's like, you're not real." Again, it was a form of denial, but in total shock that she couldn't believe that I was even real. To her, it was an out of body experience or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, she touched me and for a long time. And
Yeah.
Anyway, we got her some friends and family there, and worked through that. But and by the way, that's probably been 7, 8 years ago, and she
Mm-hmm.
and I to this day are friends on Facebook.
Wow. Well, that's a great,
Yeah, and
testimony
she
of the
is,
support that you provided.
yeah, thanked me numerous times for the way that we handled that day. Another lady, knocked on the door, and we had found her 21-year-old son in the front seat of his car in a subdivision that was under construction, and unfinished houses, and he had pulled his car up in there and taken his own life. And I knocked on their door, and it was just seemed like 90% of the stuff I had to do like this was at 1, 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was just during the night, and
Mm-hmm.
knocked on their door and went in and told them, and she went berserk, and she literally started running through the house, grabbing stuff, throwing stuff, breaking stuff, screaming and hollering. And so anyway, I just tell all those stories to say everybody reacts different.
Yeah.
In some it's a denial. The sad thing is, for most of those people like that, I'm with them through those first initial hours, and I help them. Once we get past that initial reaction, I try to talk to them. I try to listen to them. And most people, when they get in that situation, they don't know what's next. What happens to the body? What do I do? And I
Yeah.
walk them through that. And of course, one of the first things I try to do is get somebody. I'm not going to leave that house till somebody's there with them, so they can help continue with the trauma that they're experiencing.
Right.
Now, I don't get to see them down on step 2, 3, 4, down through there, where
Yes.
they start to heal, where they reach acceptance. There's a bargaining phase. I with these folks in that role I was in, I didn't get to see all that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have had the privilege of running into some people that I was there with them and delivered the notification. And I went to one of my doctors one time, and so I'm sitting in the room waiting on to check me in, took me back to a room, and I'm sitting there waiting on the doctor to come back. And there was a knock on the door, and a nurse comes in. And when the nurse came in, she froze, her jaw dropped, and she just gasped.
Yeah.
And I thought, I know I'm ugly, but I don't think I'm that ugly. And she said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I do not." And a couple more sentences that described the situation. I said, "Oh, I do remember too." And again, she was so thankful. And she and her family, it was her brother, but the whole family was together at a family all day drinking party when the accident happened. And they're very thankful. So they obviously had worked through that and were on the other end of that and had healed. So, the thing is, dealing with trauma is a process. And so there's several things that are important. There's those stages. And I'm going to tell you, I don't believe those stages come in order. And,
Yeah.
sometimes you're here, sometimes you're here,
Well,
sometimes
yeah. I was
you're
going to
blessed.
ask if those stages were even accurate at all, because it feels like a cliche for people to say, the stages of grief. And do you find that, have you seen most of those stages at coming up at different times during the process?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna negate the people who develop those or whatever. I just don't think it's that systematic, and
Okay.
it's certainly not in that order.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are other things that can enter in there too. So, um, and you can get on the other side of it, and something happens, and you regress back. So, I think the most important thing is just to realize uh, it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who want to help somebody that experiences loss or is going through anything, is to realize it is a process. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I had a 60-year-old man who came in, and he was a leader in a very large church, and his wife had walked in and found him watching pornography.
Mm-hmm.
That that was a trauma for
Of
him,
course, yeah.
and for anybody, I just use that. There's all kinds of things that bring on trauma, but there's nothing I'm going to say in those situations that's going to fix that.
Sure.
And so many times we're searching for the right thing to say. We're searching for the magic words. Well, when I tell this man at 2 o'clock in the morning, his 19-year-old daughter had been killed in a horrific crash, there wasn't anything I was going to say was going to heal that night.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just try to support, be there, love on them.
Mm-hmm.
For people that might watch this, that you want to be able to help people, and you're like, what do you say?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the less you say, probably the better off you are.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about presence versus presence. In other words, more than gifts or what I do, just my presence is the greatest thing I can do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything that's going to fix it, but I
And
can
that's
be there.
a lot of people's, they speak of the time around even funerals and things like that as being comparatively sometimes okay compared to the quietness and the drop off in people visiting over the next few weeks. And I'm sure there's probably I would imagine a huge importance on like continued support and having a support system that can stay with you throughout those stages of grief, because like you said, it can, I mean, I've found that even months later things can come up that you didn't even know that you were feeling a certain way, and then all of a sudden things come up.
Yeah, absolutely. They're called triggers. And how many times have you heard people say, well, I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but this happened and it all came back to me. So there could be triggers. But I think a big key in walking with people who are dealing with pain and hurt is availability. And
Mm-hmm.
it's presence with a C, not presence with a T.
Yeah, that's
Just
good.
being there, being available, and doing more listening than you do talking. What they have to say is a whole lot more important than anything that we have to say.
Yeah,
And,
that's good.
and one of the most healing things that you can do is facilitate somebody talking about their pain. Can't force them. But when they do, actively listening to that. And a lot of times what I would do is somebody say, well, this, and this, or I feel this. And instead of trying to fix that or being some kind of expert, it might be like, so you're feeling lonely right now. And just repeating back to them what they're saying to me,
Right.
so that they will talk about it more. And, the other thing you can't be, don't be scared of silence. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just sit with somebody. I mean, maybe nothing said, but they know your presence is there.
Watch some TV or something,
Yeah, TV, a football game, or just going for a walk, and don't feel like you have to fill the airtime. Give them space, and if they just need space to be quiet, that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So I find a lot of people when they're with people or trying to help people with trauma, they just can't stop talking, and they're scared of silence. Don't be scared of silence.
Yeah.
Another thing, this was real key, and it's something I learned in some training. But we look at people sometimes and we're like, well, why would they respond that way? Why are they doing that? Why, whatever? Well, there's no right or wrong feelings or emotions when we go through pain or trauma. Okay.
Okay.
Here's the important phrase. Whatever reactions we have are normal reactions to an abnormal situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For somebody to knock on your door and tell you your husband was killed in a horrific accident and he's not going to be coming home to take you to lunch. Well, that's an abnormal situation. Somebody gets shot in front of you. That's an abnormal situation. So whatever reactions we need to free people up that it's okay to feel whatever you feel. But here's the key. It's not right or wrong, but it can be healthy or unhealthy.
Yes.
It can be problematic or non-problematic. And the key is how do you handle it? Mm-hmm. The emotion is not wrong, but what we do with that emotion or feeling can be. Mm-hmm. This really hit home with me. I was called to the scene of a motorcycle accident one Saturday, and it was two buddies. One was a big official in Nashville. I won't say any more, but he was a big official. And he and his buddy were out in the country in Williamson County here, beautiful land, and they were riding their motorcycles, big motorcycles. And they were going down a country road, 2-lane road, and, they usually ride in tandem, like one's in front of the other, one's on one side, one's on the other, and ride side by side. And a young man was coming the opposite direction, and he hung his front right tire on the edge of the street, and there really wasn't much of a ditch or anything. And being an inexperienced driver, he overreacted and pulled it over, and the front motorcycle just, right into the car, and killed him instantly. And I got there, and the first thing I had to do was help the EMTs and the emergency people that were there unwrap his body off of the rear axle of that car.
Wow.
And so I said, where's the guy that was riding with him? And probably 50 yards down the street, sitting on the other side of the road above the little ditch beside, and the guy was just sitting there with his head down. And so I went over to him, as I would anybody in the situation, and said, "Hey, are you okay? Can we talk about this?" And he said, "No, I don't want to talk to anybody." Fair enough. Give me a space. Yeah. And I just turned to him and I said, "I just want you to know this." I said, "Whatever reactions or feelings you have now to what you just experienced and saw is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, and it's okay. And it's just how you deal with it." Mm-hmm. Well, that's all I could leave him with. 4 years later, I get a phone call in my office, and my secretary said, "There's a man on the phone that says he's got to talk to you." So she put him through, and again, he said, "You don't know me." He said, "I don't know if you remember me or not." And he told me, describe the accident. I said, "I remember you well." And he said, "Do you remember coming over to me and telling me, whatever reaction you have, it's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "I want you to know that saved my life. I don't know how many times in the last 4 years."
Wow. He
said, "I was going to kill myself, and I thought about what you told me." 4 years later. So give people space and room to have the feelings, emotions. Don't make people feel guilty. Well, you shouldn't be thinking that way. Well, that's not very godly, or whatever we try to do. And again, no thought, feeling, reaction to an abnormal situation is right or wrong. How we handle it can be right or wrong. It can be healthy or unhealthy.
Yeah. And
of course, I didn't have the chance with him, but with others, we can help them handle those emotions in appropriate ways as opposed to inappropriate, constructive ways instead of destructive ways. But that story, that phone call hit me hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, it's another testimony of what you do and how it can be so impactful to people. And, you mentioned about people being in denial and that being a fairly common response. And when someone is in denial of these situations, or they are struggling to come to terms with things, are there things that you notice that sort of bring them sort of back into the real world, if you want to put it that way, like they just something that snaps them out of it? Or, you know, you actually mentioned in the previous episode that you've been in experiences, I think, where you were at the morgue with people or doing the identification and things like that. You know, do you notice that there are things that people can see that kind of give them an understanding of what's happening?
Well, in most of the situations where I was delivering a death notification, we could work them through that denial pretty quick because we had the facts, we had the information. There was a deputy there with me who had facts and information, and I mean, there was no denying it up past a certain point. So I think, in my experience, denial is one of the shortest stages, if you want to refer to those stages. Yeah. You know, somebody dies, they die. And, you know, when you go to the funeral, I mean, there's no doubt this person has died. So, you know, I only had to go to the morgue one time in 25 years. And it was the very first call I ever went on. And it wasn't because the person was denial. It was because there was some confusion over identification. Driver's license didn't match the tag or something like that.
Yeah.
And I had to take the husband to the morgue, which at that time was right there in Franklin in Williamson County. Mm-hmm. Later, they did away with that. It's all centralized in Nashville, and it's a mess. But I had to take him down there. And you know, I was a rookie, and it was my first accident I got called to. And you know, you've seen this on TV and how they played out. And it was exactly like it was on TV. You know, you go in, body with a sheet over it, and, you know, they turn that back where just the from here up is showing. And he confirmed that it was her. So that one sticks with me because it was my first. But that was the only time I ever had to go to a morgue with somebody.
Okay. Wow.
So that's probably a good thing. Mm-hmm. You know, another thing I think is important when we're trying to help people is don't make promises you can't keep. People are already distressed. They're already let down. They're already, they may even have some guilt about what has happened, depending on what it was. They may be questioning, and they need consistency. They need people they can count on. So I was always really careful not to make promises that I couldn't keep. Yeah. And one of the things that I did do, because I was usually only there on the death notifications, I was only there for the first anywhere from 1 hour to up to 8 hours. Situation, but I would always ask permission to call them back and check on them. Mm-hmm. You know, I just say, hey, I don't want to bother you or whatever, but I would love to call you back tomorrow after maybe some of the emotion has subsided and just check on you. But I always make sure if I said that to somebody, then I followed up on that. Yeah. But as you're taking care of friends, as you're trying to help somebody that's gone through loss, don't make promises that you can't keep. That's just another letdown. Mm-hmm. That's just another disappointment. Yeah. And so I think that can be really important too.
Yeah. And you obviously have dealt with a lot of different types of situations. And do you notice, let's say, like is there a difference between someone who perhaps a loved one passed away not unexpectedly, you know, from an illness they've been dealing with, versus, let's say, an accident, versus taking their own life, versus, you know, or do all of these different situations play a part in dealing with grief in different ways?
Well, yeah. I mean, if I'm dealing with somebody whose daughter was just killed in a serious car accident and I'm knocking on the door at 2:00, that's different than you mentioned that your mom had died. Mm-hmm. And did you say it was cancer?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So there was a battle there.
Right. It wasn't unexpected in the end. Yeah.
Right. It wasn't unexpected. It wasn't sudden. I do believe that those steps to grief recovery are probably come into play, and there's more of that scale with an expected death or trauma as opposed to a sudden death or trauma.
Okay. Yeah.
So um,
Even if you mentioned about the guilt or people feeling guilty, I'd imagine with situations like suicide, that would be, a very uh, it would be, there'd be other levels of trauma beyond just losing the person as well.
great point. For example, um, people a little bit out in the country in Williamson County, and I get called to their house, and um, their son had got out to their storage barn where they kept their lawnmower stuff, and got an electrical cord, heavy duty electrical cord, wrapped around his neck and committed suicide, hung himself. His mom went out there and found him in that condition. Well, what you have there is kind of a double trauma, because you have the loss of a loved one,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have this what you saw and what you experienced, and even beyond that can be a trauma of, especially in a suicide situation, guilt. What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And people try to take that on themselves. So there can be multiple traumas in one incident. You're exactly right,
Yeah.
and that's really tough.
Mm-hmm.
We can't unsee what we've seen, and I can't imagine some of the people that I had to go be with. And one of the things I did, some people think this is weird, but I wanted to see what they had seen. Like in
Okay.
that situation where that young man had hung himself, I went out there because I wanted to see what she had seen, so I in some way could connect with that
Mm-hmm.
and connect with what she had to be going through. So, but yeah, you can have multiple whammies,
Yeah.
traumas within an event. So, what you see, what the loss, as you said, there can be a lot of things there. You know, Josh, fact, I can say this: I did what I did because I wanted to bring God to those traumatic situations, and that's where the ultimate healing comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And inevitably, even people of faith, I look around, maybe they got stuff that you walk in my house, you're going to know I'm a believer.
Yeah.
But eventually the question would always come, what about God?
Mm.
Why would God let this happen? Or depending on their theology, why did God make this happen? And probably everybody that might listen to this has either had that thought or run into that thought.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, well, what do I say?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my answer to that is, I don't have all the answers. I don't understand it. I do know this. It's a broken world. It's been broken since the Garden of Eden, and it will be broken until Jesus comes back. And as long as that's the case, then bad things are going to happen even to good people. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, don't be scared to tell somebody you don't have all the answers. I don't have
Okay.
all the answers.
Yeah.
I got some questions myself.
Yeah.
You don't have, and the second thing is, my role in all of this. I don't care if it was in my office where somebody came in and going through a terrible divorce, or a
Mm-hmm.
60-year-old church leader gets caught looking at pornography by his wife and he thinks he's going to lose his marriage. I don't care what it is. My job was never to remove them from that situation or try to fix that situation. That's not my role. My role was to help people find God in the middle of those situations.
Sure.
That was my number one goal. As we were dealing with it, and if they asked the God question, and I said, I don't know. But what I always tried to do was, let's talk about what we do know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what we do understand about
Mm-hmm.
God. God said, I will never leave you or nor forsake you.
Mm-hmm.
God said, I will give you strength. God said, I win in the end. And there's a
Yeah.
heaven prepared for those that believe in him. And try to point them to the promises of God. And as opposed to focusing on what we don't have the answers to, let's focus on what we do know.
Yeah.
And hopefully help that person try to begin to find God. I can't fix it. I can't pick them up
Mm-hmm.
and take it out of them, nor should I.
Yeah.
But maybe I can help you find God in the middle of this journey of trauma.
Yeah. Well, I think, something about what you said there, when you talked about, going and seeing what people had seen. And I think that's an incredibly brave thing to do, because I don't think many people would volunteer to do that. But it shows, your willingness to get in there in the situations that people are experiencing, and be with them in that. But, that's, you've had to probably practice what you preach in regards to things you've seen, dealing with, viewing stuff that you're not meant to see, or at least, most people hope they'll never see in their life. And, to go back a little to what people have seen on the internet, and there's a lot of people dealing with, I wish I hadn't seen that, or why did that come up in my feed? I wish that's too graphic. And when people are thinking about these things that they just wish they could take back and unsee, what are some of the things that you've done and you've learned about? Because it's probably not suppression. I'm imagining you don't want to suppress what you've seen, but it's understanding and coping with it, and confronting it. So, what are some of the things that you would say to those people?
That's a great point. I cannot tell you how many times I had officers or guys that I was training in law enforcement on how to deal with this stuff that would raise their hand and say, "Well, how do you handle it? What do you do? You're seeing the same thing we're seeing." And my response was, I have to practice what I preach. I think, again, the most important thing is when that happens, or when a visual hits my head, I don't allow myself to dwell on it.
Okay.
I'm not going to deny that it's there, but I'm not going to sit there and think about the 5 minutes before and the 5 minutes after and everything that I saw. The second thing is, if it's strong enough, I'll call up one of my buddies and talk about it. One of the keys that we worked with law enforcement officers in dealing with the traumas they had to deal with was talk about it. You can't stuff that stuff. I don't care if you're in a bad car accident. If it's just us as civilians and we're dealing with something, the best thing is find a safe place with a safe person and process it and talk about it. Because when you don't, you're keeping garbage in, and that garbage will eat you up. There's a concept, I don't know if I brought this up the first time, but it's called emotional. I hope nobody gets offended by this, but it's emotional puking. Mm-hmm. Sometimes your stomach's upset and you just think, well, if I could just throw up, I'd feel better. Just get it out. Whatever it is that's tearing me up, I just need to get it out. Well, the same's true with emotions. Sometimes you just need to emotionally puke, get it out in a safe place with a safe person.
Yeah.
And that's what I tried to be. And I would even ask them questions to pull more out. Mm-hmm. And I went through some specialty training to kind of know how to do that. But, the worst thing we could do is stuff those emotions, stuff those feelings. But again, it goes back to there's no bad reactions. There's no bad emotions. They're just normal reactions to an abnormal. So if you create this space where, hey, it's okay. It's okay if you feel that way. It's okay if you're thinking that, but let's talk about that and get people to talk. And again, it goes back, isolation is the worst thing in the world. And so getting people to talk, and it may not be the first day, the second day, or the 10th day when they're ready to talk about it. So giving people some room, some space, but again, availability that we just talked about, and presence that we talked about, all those things play into the kind of environment where we can help somebody heal and we can find healing ourselves.
Yeah, I'm finding that it's almost like we're counseling each other through what has been a tough couple of weeks, and really a couple of years, but more specifically, it's been a tough couple of weeks for this nation, because there's not only just the what people have seen, and it may be the first time seeing someone lose their life on the internet, or and you see two of them back to back, and then it's also the societal repercussions of what does it say about our country that that something like this could happen. And people are just they're struggling for meaning, and like you said, they're questioning a lot at the minute and wondering why is this happening, what's going on. And it's just, I think these are going to be helpful tips for us as we really counsel each other through this, if that makes sense, because we're not all trained counselors, but we're all struggling.
I think have relationships, have people you can talk to, have people you can process with. I'll give you a real churchy answer.
Mm-hmm.
Politics is not the answer to this. Jesus is the answer to this. Um, he's my best friend. And again, even when I don't understand or I'm questioning or I'm hurting, that's a safe place for me to go. And if you don't have that faith or that relationship, start going to church. I think more people probably went to church last Sunday than gone to church in ages as a
That's
result
right.
of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
And that's what he taught as well. And so I think those are the things. Don't isolate. Have a good circle of friends. Be willing to talk about these things and get those things out. Talking about that law of the thirds I talked about at first. Let's take the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I saw the vivid pictures of Charlie Kirk getting shot, not just the ones that stopped. And then I go back to the Ukrainian migrant girl that was killed on the bus. Seeing her immediately after that sequence, balled up, bleeding to death, and her look on her face as she looked up to her assailant, wondering what was next. Okay, of the two images, that emotional, she was experiencing physical pain, but that emotion that I saw in her face right there caused me more trauma than seeing Charlie Kirk, the physical aspect of him getting shot.
Sure. Yeah.
And so for me, you asked me how I deal with those things. I saw bodies in all kinds of conditions. People that took 12 gauge, put under their chin and blew their head off. People that are almost decapitated in a car wreck. All kinds of stuff. Those things did not bother me as much as the emotions of the people that I had to go tell, and just the raw emotions and reactions. And that's the way God built me. Those emotions and the pain, just like that girl on that bus, uh, those things bothered me more and haunt me more to this day
Yeah.
than the physical destruction that I saw.
Well, yeah, because there's the people who have been most affected. In the first case with that girl, it was people thinking of their daughters or someone in their family, their sister. And then with Charlie Kirk, people are thinking, well, there's a wife without a husband, and now that you're saying that, I
Yeah,
think that makes a lot of sense. Where maybe even more so than the gore of the situation, it's the thinking of you've just witnessed really you're witnessing the aftermath at the same time. You're seeing what happened, and then you're also seeing and thinking about what the effects are going to be for their families and
yeah.
that sort of thing as well.
There was more than one occasion, but I remember one specifically. There was a man in a bad car accident on a major interstate here, and the result was that on the driver's side, where the little metal strip there between front and back windows, almost cut his head off, and it's pretty gruesome. And blood loss was phenomenal. Well, we had to sit there for 2 hours waiting on the people from the morgue to get there. We couldn't move the body. So we couldn't 100% positively identify him so that I could go deliver the death notification. So I'm standing on the interstate with every kind of emergency vehicle. They shut it down.
Yeah.
And we're standing there for 2 hours, and I'm with all these first responders. I can't tell you how many of them came up to me and said, you know what? I'd rather be here and experience this and experience what you're fixing to have to go do. They realize the difference in the gore. That's a good word that you use, as opposed to what I was going to have to do and deal with the emotional part of it. Now the thing with me, and God bless me in this, is I had to deal with both. They only
Yeah.
had to deal with the gore. I
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
deal with the gore and then go deal with the emotion. But I really believe during all that and all those years, I look back on it and God had his hand on it. He wanted me to be doing what I was doing, and he protected me.
Yeah.
And, do I think about some of that stuff every once in a while? Yeah. Does it eat on me? Do I have PTSD or anything like that? No. And I can only assign that to God. And I do think what we want to do in whatever situation is go be God in people's lives.
Yeah.
Love them when nobody else loves them. I don't care if it's traumatic or if it's not. And that's all I ever wanted to do is. And again, I think I said this, but people say, "Why would you want to do this?" Well, I want to bring God. What worse situation could there be than sitting in my office pouring out their life, or I'm going out to deliver a deadline, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I just God's got something to say to that situation.
Yeah.
And we need to be, for those who have faith, we need to be people that are so filled up with God that we want to go be God in people's lives and to help, because God has something to say about that. It is not the end. And there are questions, and we don't have to have all the answers. One of the greatest times of my life as a minister was when I learned to say, you know what, I don't know. That's okay. Because if I did have all the answers and if I did know everything, then I'd be a God myself.
Yeah.
So I learned to be thankful for the things that I couldn't explain or didn't know. But there are a lot of hurting people out there. And your wisdom in saying, yeah, my daughter today, when she said what she said about watching that on television, I thought, man, there's a lot of people experiencing trauma they haven't experienced. But whether it's Charlie Kirk or the Ukrainian girl, there's things. Satan is alive and well out there.
Yeah,
people are hurting, and we have the salve for that, if you would. We have the cure for that, and we've just got to be willing. Don't be afraid you're going to say the wrong thing. Don't be hesitant. Just go pull up alongside of somebody, sit with them, walk with them. Don't be scared to say the wrong thing. Listen 10 times more than you talk, and just be present. Presence, again, more important than present.
Yeah. And, this has been a wonderful conversation again, just like our previous one. And, just as a final note, I'm thinking of, obviously there's going to be people out there that have a calling to do what you do, the sort of things that you do or have done. What would you say to someone who's curious about whether that could be a calling for them? Because, not everyone could handle it. And is there a way to kind of confirm that, or to know if it's something that if people are out there thinking, I want to be there with people, what would you say to people who are curious about it?
I don't think you have to go anywhere to be able to do a lot of what we're talking about. It's your friends, it's your neighbors, it's your people, hopefully at church, it's people within your social groups or whatever. Just pray for a sensitivity to people's pain and people's hurting, and then go be Jesus. And just now, if you want to do that on a bigger level, like I did as a chaplain, that's a pretty niche.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce that word? But
yeah.
That was a pretty niche thing. And for me, it was a matter of God made it clear to me that I had a heart for that, and that he opened doors for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's really not something that you can go knock on a door and say, hey, I want to do this. I think the biggest thing is just developing a heart that cares about people, and a heart that is filled with Jesus, so that you have something to offer to people who are hurting.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. And, we could talk about, I'm sure, stories, all night long, and I would love to do so, and perhaps we can do it again in the future. Again, there's still so much more to talk about, I feel like, and so much more of your experience to draw upon. But unfortunately, we'll probably have to end it there for this week. But I do want to say thank you for, again, what you've done for people and what you do for people, and also for agreeing to take time out of your day to share your wisdom with me and with everyone watching. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Josh, for giving me the opportunity to hopefully help some people as a result of the experiences that I've had. And it means a lot for me that you called again. Mm-hmm. And maybe I did better this time. I don't know.
I think you did great the first time as well. I think it was very well received.
You can call me anytime you want to.
I appreciate that. And is there anything you want to finish off by saying to people, or anything that you really wanted to say that we didn't hit on? I want to give you that opportunity.
You did a really good job of guiding us through that. And there was a lot of things that we don't have time. I had a whole list of things not to say. I would hear the stupidest. Okay, I'll close with this. This is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Never tell somebody, I know how you feel. You do not.
Okay.
Your mom died, my mom died. We're not going to respond to that the same way. And we minimize people's feelings. We say, well, I know how you feel. No, you don't. Every person's reaction is guided by, as we talked about, past experiences
Mm-hmm.
or faith or no faith, all kinds of things. So you don't know how somebody feels. Just pull up alongside of them and just love them. And, we live in a world where we need to watch out for each other. And it's been a rough couple of weeks. And I would just close by saying, uh, God's the answer.
Amen. Well, thank you for that. And thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch. I hope you got something out of this. I don't know how you could watch it and not come away with, some really practical things you can go and apply in your life. So, thank you for tuning in. And if you have learned something new or there's something you want to ask, be sure to put that in the comments below. And I think there was a few times after our last episode that I would drop some comments to you about your previous episode. And, I endeavor to do that, at least if people leave comments, and be sure that if you comment below that I'll pass that on and see if I can answer any questions you might have. But unfortunately, that's all for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you tune in again for another episode of the 2 Things You Shouldn't Talk About. But yeah, thanks for listening, and God bless.